The traditional ticket to a really good job in America, a degree from business school.
Okay, guys, you're going out and earning 6 figures.
Instead of cheese, the dean of the Rutgers Business School in Camden, New Jersey, used the carrot of wealth to get his 4-year grads and MBAs to smile for the camera in the teeth of a grim reality of recent years, a so-called jobless economic recovery. No matter how good these kids looked, though, they considered their job prospects dreary.
On a scale of 1 to 10, sort of with your voices, so I guess it's yeah, it's something like that. What's the job market out there like at the moment?
But why were students groaning when, at the time of this graduation, the official U.S. unemployment number was only 5.8%, certainly not high by historical standards? In 1982, for example, the rate was over 10%. In the Great Depression, something like 25%. So what do we make of today's unemployment number? That's the purpose of this video, as well as to show you the several different types of unemployment, and finally, so what?
Now, the monthly unemployment number is gathered by government survey takers like Joanne Burns.
I'm Joanne Burns. I'm with the United States Census Bureau, and we just need a little information.
Joanne Burns is keeping track of unemployment in the Newark, New Jersey area, one of some 2,000 government employees who have 1 week each month to track down and survey 35 households. 60,000 households are in the sample.
There's also a separate survey of businesses, the so-called establishment survey that tracks the creation of new jobs. But this is the household survey, begun in 1940 with pen and paper. Today, it's conducted with a computer. For the statistics to be accurate, every interview counts. But it's not always easy to get people to open up.
Sometimes when you have a difficult person who turns you away the first time or so, send them a card. When you go back the next time and you say, "Oh, did you get my card?" "Oh, was that you?" I say, "Yes, that was me." "Oh, come in. Beautiful card," and you got them. You go in and you do the interview.
The efforts of people like Joanne Burns and the work of more than 200 phone interviewers result in a response rate of better than 90%.
How many hours per week does she usually work at her job?
The responses become the unemployment number reported the first Friday of each month. For simplicity, let's exaggerate and say there were 14 million unemployed this month. Let's also assume a workforce of 140 million. This would produce an official unemployment rate of 10%. So what, you say? Well, as we've explained before when introducing the trusty old production possibilities curve, an economy is always trying to produce on the curve instead of inside it. That is, imagine that the curve or frontier represents everything the economy can provide. Say, every possible good on one axis, every possible service on the other. If it uses the resources efficiently, the best way it can, then it'll be somewhere on the frontier. This much of goods, this much of services, or perhaps this much and this much. But now suppose there's unemployment. People who are lining up for jobs but can't get them. They could be fixing your roof, helping me with my business, making stuff for all of us. But they're not. So the economy, at less than full employment, is not doing as much as it could, but somewhat less, and thus finds itself inside the curve, not at maximum production.
Another important thing to understand is that there isn't just one kind of unemployment. In fact, there are 3 different kinds, which we're now going to introduce: structural, cyclical, and frictional.
Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more.
What kind of unemployment is this?
Take this job and shove it. I ain't working here no more. My woman done left and took all the reasons I've been working for. I don't remember the rest of it, but you get the idea, right? So he's telling his boss to kiss off. He's quitting.
The late country singer, disgruntled Johnny Paycheck, had a vivid way of expressing his type of unemployment. But
what type of unemployment would we call that? Is that cyclical unemployment? Did he lose his job because the whole economy is going in the tank? No. Did he lose? Is it a structural unemployment? Is what happened to him peculiar to one particular industry? No. So that means he would be considered part of frictional unemployment. Frictional is the people in between jobs, people who have quit jobs or people entering and re-entering the job market. And in a big economy like ours with close to 300 million people, you're always going to have that. You're always going to have some frictional unemployment. It's just, the workings of the machine. It's, the gears turning.
Now, when Mr. Paycheck suggested that his boss take the gig and put it where the sun don't shine, as many of us would sometimes like to, he was what's called a job leaver. By making the decision to quit and search for a better situation, he made himself part of the official unemployment rate. He presumably looked for work in the next month, but he wasn't going to take just anything. This is an example of frictional unemployment, as Professor Fay pointed out. People moving in and out of jobs, or as in the case of the Rutgers grads, new entrants perhaps, moving into the job market for the first time. Structural unemployment is longer term. There's a change in the structure of the economy, and thus jobs are moving from one industry or location to another, such as when technological change in the auto or steel industries force blue-collar layoffs, or when service sector jobs are outsourced to other countries.
The black bra and the CD recorder will be delivered by 6 p.m. Friday.
And finally, there's cyclical unemployment. Job loss due to economic downturns. We've seen this happen in the recession of the early 2000s, the market crash that led to the Great Depression. Some economists add a fourth type, seasonal unemployment, when you lose your ski lift job, for example, or your early spring stint helping taxpayers at the local H&R Block. The point is that when economists talk about full employment, they don't mean a rate of zero, because, as Mr. Paycheck and others illustrate, there are variables that make a certain amount of unemployment inevitable. In fact, due to frictional, structural, and even seasonal unemployment, the official unemployment rate has never been lower than 2.9%. Remember, though, if Mr. Paycheck or any job leaver didn't look for a job in the past month, he or she wouldn't be counted as officially unemployed, just as these students wouldn't be if they weren't looking for work. Now for a last point about the unemployment number. In recent years, some economists have begun to wonder if the monthly number isn't undercounting actual unemployment. There are, it turns out, 3 reasons why that might be so.
I need a job, for real.
Yes, help us out.
After today, right now, I'll be looking for a job.
When we interviewed them, not one of these Chicago 20-somethings had worked in the past year, giving them much in common with David Jones, who has advanced degrees in engineering and business.
So let's see what that does to our performance.
Jones had lost his financial consulting job more than a year ago. He was doing work for a friend in real estate, but would only get paid if the project panned out. But none of these young men was part of the official unemployment number, because all of them were too discouraged to look for work in the previous month.
I bet I would have been one of those people who was not counted in the unemployment statistics. The job market was pretty tough, and particularly in Chicago. So I was not looking for a little while.
Neither, says Jones, were many of his friends. So they're what the government calls discouraged workers, not officially unemployed, but out of the workforce entirely, as all of these young men were.
Have you looked for work in the last 4 weeks?
No.
Have you looked for work in the last 4 weeks?
No.
So
I basically, really, honestly, I gave up.
Now, for our purposes, it doesn't really matter why all these people aren't looking for work, only that none of them were being counted as unemployed. Then there's a second growing group of non-working Americans that goes uncounted, especially when jobs become scarce. Those who leave the workforce to get government disability. Economist David Otter is the expert here.
Approximately 1% of all adults ages 16 to 64 are applying for disability every year.
How do you account for this?
When jobs disappear, when opportunities are rare, people look for other means of income replacement. It's a lifetime of income replacement plus medical benefits.
And third, there's prison. Today, more than 2 million American men are behind bars. And these men would otherwise have a huge unemployment rate, says Diane Williams, who runs a Chicago program for ex-offenders, the Safer Foundation.
Approximately a third of the people who were incarcerated were in fact working at the time of incarceration. 2/3, therefore, were not employed before going into the institution and obviously are not likely to be employed coming out.
The bottom line is that when you add the imprisoned to the disabled and the discouraged, you get unemployment far higher than the monthly number the government reports. Then add those with part-time work looking for full-time.
Add those looking for jobs a lot more challenging than the ones they've got. Even add those who are working harder than they want to, forced overtime, for example. And in the end, you've got a very different picture of the job market than the official data suggest. And more importantly, an economy operating well inside its production possibilities frontier, even though the current unemployment number may sound low.
Remember, since the whole point of economics is the production of as much as possible of what we most want, food, videos, for some of us hair, unemployment is a cost to us as consumers. That is, people are sitting idle who could be trying to provide what we want. And in addition, of course, unemployment can be a devastating cost to those who happen to be unemployed. They're hurt as consumers, of course, but unemployment also seems to lead to poorer physical and mental health. And that, in turn, tends to cost all of us, since the ill wind up relying on public services which we all pay for. In that sense, unemployment is also a negative externality to the economy as a whole. Last but not least, remember those gloomy Rutgers grads? As members of the frictionally unemployed, they're an inevitable and, in a sense, deliberate feature of the labor market. But that's probably little consolation to them. And they might even stir an economist's sympathy by pointing out that the key factor of production they represent, labor, is being underutilized as they look for work.